Welcome back, night owls. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens when the Vatican decides you're the perfect fit for a job no one else wants. Tonight's story comes from a voice recording found on an encrypted phone in Rome last month. The man who made it? Well, let's just say the church has no record of him ever existing. He called himself Luca Rossi. And this is his confession. Listen close, because some rules were never meant to be spoken aloud. Chapter 1, The Black Sealed Letter and the Elevator That Goes Too Deep. My name is Luca Rossi, and right now I'm sitting in a room so far underground that daylight feels like a fairy tale I told myself as a kid. If you're hearing this, it means they haven't found the phone yet. Or maybe they have, and they're letting it circulate as a warning. Either way, I don't have much time. Let me start from the beginning, before everything went to hell. I'm 42 years old, divorced, no kids, thank God for that, and until 3 months ago, I was living in a one-room apartment in Naples that smelled like old pizza and regret. I used to be a cop, a good one. Or so I thought, 20 years on the force, mostly vice, chasing Camorra runners through the alleys until one night I chased the wrong guy into a warehouse and came out with a bullet in my shoulder and a bottle in my hand. The department gave me a medal, a pension that barely covered rent, and a quiet suggestion to disappear before internal affairs asked too many questions about the cash I found during raids. My wife, Sophia, stuck around for another year after that. She said she could smell the whiskey on my soul. One morning I woke up to an empty closet and a note that just said, "Basta, enough." So there I was, scraping by on odd jobs, bouncing at clubs, driving unlicensed taxis, whatever paid cash and didn't ask for references. The days blurred together. I'd sit on the balcony at dusk, watching the Bay of Naples turn blood orange, chain-smoking MS cigarettes, and wondering if the water was deep enough to make it quick. My mother used to say God had a plan for me. Turns out God's plan involved a letter that showed up one Tuesday morning with no stamp, no return address, just heavy cream paper folded inside an envelope, sealed with black wax. The seal wasn't a crest or a coat of arms. It was a cross, upside down, like the kind you see in heavy metal videos, but pressed so perfectly it looked wet. Inside was a single sheet, typed in perfect Italian. Signor Rossi, your particular skills and discretion have been noted. The Apostolic Archive requires a night custodian of strong constitution. Report to Porta Sant'Anna, Vatican City, November the 31st, 02, one-way transportation, enclosed compensation nightly. In envelope, no questions, no refusal, in service, a friend. Tucked beneath was a first-class train ticket from Napoli Centrale to Roma Termini. Dated for Halloween night. No barcode, no price. Just my name handwritten in the same blood-brown ink as the signature. I laughed at first, thought it was a prank from one of the old squad, the ones who still thought my downfall was hilarious. But when I flipped the envelope over, a stack of euros spilled out, 50 notes, crisp and sequential. More money than I'd seen in years, enough to pay 3 months back rent and keep the landlord's thugs off my door. Sophia's voice echoed in my head. Basta, enough. I packed a duffel bag with 2 changes of clothes, my service pistol, unregistered now, and the rosary my mother made me promise to keep, the one with the cracked ivory crucifix. The train ride was a blur. I drank grappa from a plastic bottle and watched Campania slide past the window like a bad memory. Rome at midnight was chaos. Tourists still stumbling drunk from Halloween parties, dressed as sexy nuns and zombie popes. I took a taxi to the Vatican walls, told the driver to keep the change when he gave me that look, the one that said, "Another crazy person." Porta Sant'Anna is the side entrance the Swiss guards use, hidden between columns that tourists never notice. At exactly 002 Saux, the gate cracked open. The guard who greeted me wasn't the colorful Renaissance costume you see on postcards. This one wore black tactical gear under a plain cloak, face hidden behind a matte helmet with no insignia. He didn't speak, just held out a gloved hand. I gave him the letter. He scanned it with a device that looked like a price gun, then stepped aside. The gate closed behind me with a sound like a coffin lid. He led me through courtyards I'd only seen in documentaries, past fountains that gurgled like dying men, until we reached a nondescript iron door set into a wall older than my entire bloodline. Another guard waited there, same uniform, same silence. They opened the door to reveal a brass elevator cage that looked like it belonged in a 19th century horror film. Gilded vines, cherubs with missing wings, a floor indicator that went down to numbers I'd never seen on any building. 7, 8, 9, all the way to 13. The guard pressed, none 12. The doors closed with a sigh. That's when it started feeling wrong. The descent should have taken 10 seconds, maybe 15, but the counter kept clicking past floors that couldn't exist. 20 seconds, 30, 45 seconds of freefall that made my stomach lurch, like I'd missed a step on stairs that never ended. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of wet stone and candle smoke. I caught the guard watching me in the reflection, except the helmet's visor was completely black, like staring into a void. When the elevator finally jerked to a stop, my ears popped hard enough to make me stagger. The doors opened onto a corridor that stretched farther than perspective allowed. Marble floors veined with gold, walls lined with shelves that disappeared into darkness overhead. Oil lamps hung from chains every 10 meters, flames burning steady blue without visible fuel or wick. The air tasted metallic, like I'd licked a battery. My footsteps echoed wrong, too many of them, like someone walking a half second out of sync behind me. The guard pointed to a small alcove cut into the wall, a guard booth barely bigger than a confessional. Inside was a wooden chair worn smooth by generations of asses, a desk with a green banker's lamp, and a brass speaking tube that looked like it connected to nowhere. On the desk lay two things: a rosary made of what I prayed were animal bones, small, knobby, definitely phalanges, and a single sheet of vellum pinned under a silver paperweight shaped like a screaming cherub. The rules were written in Latin first, then Italian underneath. In that same blood-brown ink, 1. Never open the red leather codex after midnight. 2. If you hear 3 slow knocks from inside a sealed tomb, answer only with your mother's maiden name spoken backward. 3. The weeping Madonna in Chapel 17 must never stop crying. Collect the tears and drink 1 drop at dawn. 4. Do not follow the child in the red cassock who walks only in reflections. 5. If the relic of the true cross begins to burn with cold blue flame. Extinguish it only with fresh blood from the left wrist of a sinner. 6. Never read aloud the final name in the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the page that was never printed. 7. When they finally come for you, do not run, kneel and recite the act of contrition backward in Latin. Only then will you be allowed to die quickly. The guard pressed something into my hand, an envelope thick with cash, then stepped back into the elevator. The doors closed. I was alone. I sat there for hours, or what felt like hours, reading those rules until the words blurred. The silence was absolute, the kind that presses against your eardrums like water. Then I heard it, the elevator cables above me, somewhere in the shaft that went up forever, beginning to scream, not metal fatigue, not wind, screams, human voices twisted into something worse, layered over each other like a choir of the damned, and beneath the screaming, a wet scraping sound, something with too many joints climbing down the cables toward the booth. I haven't moved since. The envelope is still unopened on the desk. The rosary is in my fist so tight the bones have cut my palm. If you're Catholic, say a prayer for me. If you're not, pray anyway, because whatever's coming down those cables knows my name. Chapter 2, Rule 1, never open the red leather codex after midnight. You ever have one of those nights where the quiet gets so heavy it feels like a hand pressing on your chest? That was my first full shift. The booth's green lamp buzzed like a dying insect. The bone rosary lay cold on the desk, and the cash envelope sat there unopened because touching it felt like accepting a deal I hadn't read the fine print on yet. I kept rereeling the 7 rules under the light, tracing the brown ink with a finger that still smelled of train grappa and Naples rain. Rule 1 was written bigger than the rest, almost angry. Never open the red leather codex after midnight. No explanation. No or else. Just that single line, underlined so hard the vellum had torn a little. I told myself I'd follow every damn rule. I'm not stupid. 20 years wearing a badge teaches you that curiosity is a luxury cops and cats can't afford. And I'd already used up 8 of my 9 lives. But the money was good. The alternative was going home to an empty apartment and a landlord who collected fingers as reminders. And honestly, after Sophia left, after the bottle became my only girlfriend, I'd stopped believing anything could still scare me. The corridor outside the booth stretched both ways into darkness thicker than any I'd seen in Naples alleys. The oil lamps floated in their chains, blue flames perfectly still, throwing just enough light to make the marble look wet. Somewhere far off, water dripped in a rhythm that almost sounded like a heartbeat. Drip, 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 like it was counting something down. I lasted until 11:47 p.m. That's when the boredom hit harder than fear. My phone had no signal this deep, big surprise, and the only reading material was a 1950s maintenance log that read like a shopping list. Replaced bulb in corridor pious, noted blood on page 217 of Codex Omega, cleaned, blood on a page, normal Tuesday. At 11:52 I stood up, knees cracking like gunfire in the silence. I told myself I was just stretching my legs, just a quick walk to stay awake. The Swiss guards hadn't come back, no handover, no radio check, just me and whatever the church kept buried under St. Peter's bones. Section Alpha 7 was only 2 corridors over. I found the sign easily enough. Brass plate, Latin inscription, a little arrow pointing left like it was giving directions to the bathroom. The air changed as I walked, colder, thicker, like breathing inside a crypt that still had bodies in it. My flashlight picked out shelves that went up 30, 40 feet, leather spines cracked with age, gold lettering flaked off so bad most titles were guesswork, somewhere high above. A book shifted by itself and settled again with a sigh. The lectern stood in the center of the section like an altar. Iron chain as thick as my wrist ran from a ring in the floor, up through a hole in the wood, and looped twice around the book itself. The codex was huge, 2 feet tall, covers made of red leather so dark it looked black until the lamplight hit it, and it was warm, not room temperature warm, body warm. When I rested my palm on it, I swear I felt a pulse, slow and heavy, like something asleep but dreaming. I glanced at my watch, 2:01. The second hand swept past the 12, and I laughed, actually laughed, because what kind of idiot stands in front of the one thing he's explicitly told not to touch and thinks? How bad can it be? The kind who once put a gun in his mouth in a Naples bathroom and only stopped because the whiskey made his hands shake too hard to pull the trigger. That kind. The chain was padlocked, but the key was hanging right there on a little hook underneath the lectern. Someone wanted this opened, needed it opened. I slid the key in, turned it, felt the mechanism click like teeth. The chain slithered to the floor with a sound like rosary beads spilled across marble. The cover was heavier than it had any right to be. When I lifted it, the leather stuck to my fingers for a second, like it didn't want to let go. The first page was blank, completely blank, not even yellowed parchment, just pure white, brighter than the lamps had any business making it. Then the ink started bleeding up, not dripping down, up. Black Latin letters, rising through the page like drowned words, floating to the surface. They formed fast, sentence after sentence, cursive so elegant it hurt to look at. My Latin is rusty, 12 years of Catholic school beaten out of me by life. But some words you never forget. Domini, libera nos a malo. Lord, deliver us from evil. I should have closed it then, should have walked away, chained it back, pretended I'd never left the booth. But the next line formed slower, deliberate, like whoever was writing it knew I was watching. Luca Rossi, filius Mariae, peccator. My name, my mother's name, the word sinner. My mouth went dry. The air smelled suddenly of copper and candle smoke. Another line bled upward, and this one wasn't in Latin anymore. It was Italian, my own handwriting. The same scrawl I used on reports back when I still believed in justice. If you're reading this, I'm already dead. Tell Sophia I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I wrote those words in 2009 on the back of a bar napkin the night I sat on the edge of the tub with my service pistol under my chin. I never sent the note. I burned it in the sink and watched the flames crawl up my reflection. The page kept filling. More lines I remembered typing into my phone. Drunk texts I deleted before sending. Confessions I whispered in empty confessionals where the priest had long since fallen asleep. Every regret, every dark thought, every time I chose the bottle over my wife, over my badge, over God, laid out in perfect calligraphy. I slammed the book shut so hard the lectern shook. My hands were shaking worse than that night in the bathroom. The cover was hotter now, almost burning, and when I pulled away, I saw the print of my palm had left a blister on the leather, like it had branded me instead. I chained it again, fumbled the key back onto its hook, and ran. Not walked, ran back to the booth, boots pounding echoes that sounded like someone chasing me. I collapsed into the chair, gasping, sweat freezing on my skin in the crypt air. For an hour, nothing happened, just the drip, drip, drip of that distant water. I laughed at myself. Hallucination, exhaustion, too much grappa on the train. I even opened the cash envelope to calm down. 50 crisp hundreds, more than I'd made in 6 months. See? Worth it. Just a weird book. Old ink trick. Vatican smoke and mirrors. Then the burning started. It began in my eyes, like I'd stared at the sun too long. I rubbed them hard, and when I looked at my forearms, there were letters under the skin, faint at first, like bruises forming in fast forward, then darker, raised, moving, Latin phrases crawling across my veins like worms under parchment. Peccavi nimis. I have sinned too much. They twisted, rearranged themselves, spelling out new words in pulsing script. I scratched until I drew blood, but the letters just drank it in and grew sharper. I grabbed the bone rosary and pressed it to my forearm like a crucifix against a vampire. The phrases hissed, actually hissed, like steam escaping a pipe. And for one blessed second, they faded. Then they came back stronger, forming a date across both wrists in block letters that looked freshly tattooed. 2nd November 2025, tomorrow. I'm writing this on my phone at 2:03 a.m., November 1st. The skin on my arms is raw, and the letters keep shifting, counting down the hours like a death row clock. The codex is still chained. I can hear it breathing from 2 corridors away, slow, patient, waiting for me to come back and finish reading. If you're Catholic, you know what they say about despair being the one sin God won't forgive. Turns out the Vatican keeps receipts. Tell me in the comments, would you open that book a second time if it knew every secret you ever tried to bury? Because I think I have to. Chapter 3, Rule 2, if you hear 3, slow knocks from inside a sealed tomb. Answer only with your mother's maiden name spoken backward. The tattoos stopped hurting after the first sunrise I never saw. They just itched now, like ants marching in formation under the skin, rearranging themselves every hour or so into new warnings. I couldn't read without a mirror. I kept my sleeves pulled down and tried not to think about tomorrow's date branded across my veins. Cash envelopes kept appearing on the desk every dawn, thick, anonymous, smelling faintly of myrrh and old blood. I counted one once, enough to buy Sophia a house she'd never live in with me again. I left the rest unopened. Touching the money felt like shaking hands with whatever wrote those rules. Sleep wasn't an option. The booth had a cot that smelled like 100 other men had died on it. But every time I closed my eyes, the codex whispered my suicide note in Latin like a lullaby. So I walked the corridors instead, flashlight beam cutting through the blue lamp glow, boots echoing too loud, too alone. The air tasted of candle wax and wet stone, the same smell you get in Naples catacombs where the skulls still have hair. That's how I found Corridor Sanctus 9. It wasn't on any map taped inside the booth, just a brass plate half hidden behind a shelf of reliquaries shaped like arms and eyes. The corridor narrowed fast, ceiling dropping until I had to duck, walls sweating cold moisture that ran in slow rivulets down to a single marble tomb at the dead end. White Carrara, veined like skin, lid carved with a sleeping woman's in Dominican robes. Saint Caterina da Siena. The plaque read 1347 to 1380. Relics translated to Siena, 1983. Officially empty, unofficially. The lid was sealed with lead poured into grooves that looked freshly melted, and someone had scratched a warning in Italian so deep it scarred the marble. Do not speak to her unless she asks twice. Rule 2 stared up at me from the vellum every time I sat down, written in that same angry brown ink. If you hear 3 slow knocks from inside a sealed tomb, answer only with your mother's maiden name spoken backward. No or else, no explanation, just like the Codex rule. The Vatican loves its mysteries, the way Naples loves its secrets, buried deep and guarded by people who'd rather kill you than explain. I stood there a long time that first night, flashlight beam crawling over Katerina's stone face. She looked peaceful, almost smiling, hands folded like she was praying for whoever was stupid enough to stand guard over an empty box. I was about to leave when the temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged. The oil lamps behind me dimmed to embers, and then it came, knock, slow, deliberate, from inside the marble, knock. The sound traveled through stone and bone and settled in my spine like ice water. Knock, 3 knocks, exactly like the rule said, not frantic, not pleading, patient, like someone who had all eternity and knew it. My mouth went dry. My mother's voice floated up from childhood, Maria Esposito. Before she married my father and became Rossi, Esposito backward is Otipse. I'd never said it out loud in my life. The silence after the 3rd knock stretched so thin I could hear my pulse in my ears. Something inside the tomb shifted, stone grinding on stone, the tiniest scrape, waiting. I should have walked away, should have pretended I never heard it, but the tattoos on my arms flared hot, like the Codex reminding me what happens when you ignore the rules down here. So I leaned close to the cold marble and whispered, "Oh, Tips." The answering sigh that came from inside wasn't sound. It was pressure, a release, like a lung that had been holding its breath for 42 years. Something heavy settled in my chest, right behind the sternum. Not pain, weight, like someone had poured wet cement between my ribs, and it was already hardening. Then nothing. The lamps flared back to full blue. The air warmed. I stumbled back to the booth gasping, clawing at my shirt because it felt too tight, like my rib cage had shrunk 2 sizes. The bone rosary burned against my skin. I sat there until the next envelope appeared, hands shaking so bad I couldn't light a cigarette. Second night, or what passes for night when you're 12 floors under St. Peter's and the only clock is your heartbeat. I stayed in the booth, sleeves still down, tattoos say itching like hell, counting euros I didn't want. I'd convinced myself the weight in my chest was imagination, stress, bad circulation from the cold. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the knocks came again, but this time they weren't from Corridor Sanctus 9. They were inside me. Knock. From the center of my chest, muffled like someone trapped behind bone. Knock. My sternum vibrated with each one. I could feel it, feel her, shifting under the ribs, pressing outward. Knock. I doubled over, gagging on air that suddenly tasted of grave dirt and incense. My fingers clawed at my shirt, ripping buttons, trying to get to whatever was moving in there. The skin over my heart bulged, a small fist pushing from inside, testing the cage. That's when I coughed. It started dry, then wet, then something solid tore its way up my throat. I spat it into my palm, warm, slick, black as obsidian, a human tooth, a canine, too small for an adult. The root was still bleeding. It wasn't mine. I sat there staring at it until dawn, or whatever passes for dawn, the weight in my chest settling deeper, like it had found a home. The tattoos rearranged themselves again, spelling a new phrase across my collarbone in letters that wept tiny drops of blood. She is hungry. That's when I started reading the old logs. They were hidden in a false panel under the desk, cheap spiral notebooks, dozens of them, going back decades, different handwriting, same story. Every guard who ever answered the knocks started feeling the weight, then the knocking from inside, then the tooth, then the dreams. Katerina as a little girl in Siena, starving herself for God, begging to be let into living bodies because her own had been taken away too soon. The ones who tried to cut her out didn't die from blood loss. They died from heartbreak when they saw what they'd done to themselves. The last entries was dated 3 weeks ago, the handwriting shaky, ink smeared with what might have been tears. She says your mother's name now. She says thank you for the door. I can't hold her much longer. Tell my wife I'm sorry, I answered. There was a Polaroid taped to the page, a man's bare chest, skin split open in a perfect Y incision like an autopsy, but done with fingernails, ribs pried apart, nothing inside but shadow, and a child-sized handprint in blood. I haven't slept since. The weight shifts when I walk now, like something pacing behind my heart, measuring the space. Sometimes I catch it whispering in a voice that sounds like my mother's, but isn't. O-tips? O-tips? Let me out. Luca, I'm so cold. If you grew up Catholic like me, you know saints aren't always what the pictures show. Some of them never left the grave willing. Drop a comment if you're still watching. Would you have answered the knocks? Or would you have let her stay buried? Because I think tomorrow night she knocks a 4th time, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep the door closed. Chapter 4, Rule 3. The weeping Madonna in Chapel 17 must never stop crying. I stopped counting the cash after the 5th envelope. It didn't matter anymore. The money was just paper down here. Paper that smelled like church incense and old guilt. The weight behind my sternum had become a roommate now. A quiet passenger that shifted when I walked too fast and whispered my mother's maiden name backward when I tried to pray. The black tooth sat on the corner of the desk like a tiny accusation, catching the green lamplight every time I looked at it. I hadn't thrown it away. Couldn't. It felt like evidence. The tattoos had settled into a pattern, tomorrow's date across my wrists, and a new phrase crawling up my neck every shift. Lacrimosa. I had to Google it on my phone before the signal died completely. Latin for weeping. Real helpful. That's how I ended up in Chapel 17. It wasn't a real chapel. not like the ones upstairs with tourists and gift shops. This one was carved straight out of the bedrock, maybe 30 feet long, low ceiling dripping with condensation that tasted like iron when it hit your tongue. A single wooden Madonna stood at the far end on a pedestal of black marble veined with gold. 14th century, the little brass plaque said, carved during the Black Death by a monk who lost 7 sisters in 1 week. The wood was dark walnut, almost black with age, but her face, sweet, sorrowful, eyes downcast, looked freshly polished. Her cheeks were wet, always wet. Real tears, not condensation, not some hidden tube trick. I watched them form in the corners of her carved eyes, gather, and roll down in perfect tracks that never dried. They collected in a shallow groove at the base of the pedestal and dripped, plink, 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 into a silver chalice someone had placed there like a communion cup. The sound was the only thing louder than the knocking in my chest some nights. Rule 3 was written on the vellum in letters so small I had to squint. The weeping Madonna in Chapel 17 must never stop crying. Collect the tears in the silver chalice and drink 1 drop at dawn. Know why. Know what happens if you don't, just like the others. But the old logs were clear about this one. Every guard who forgot, or refused, or decided they were too good for medieval superstition woke up to silence. No plink plink. And then the screaming started. Not theirs. Something else's. Something that had been asleep for centuries and didn't like being disturbed. I followed the rule the first few nights out of pure terror. The chalice was always half full by the time the overhead lamps flickered their version of sunrise. Cold white LEDs hidden in the ceiling that came on like Judgment Day. The tears were warm, faintly salty, with a metallic aftertaste like communion wine gone bad. 1 drop on the tongue at dawn, and the weight in my chest eased a little, like the thing inside me was being lulled back to sleep by a mother's lullaby. I hated it, hated how it felt like absolution I hadn't earned. Then came the night I fucked up. I'd found a bottle of grappa in one of the old lockers, half empty, label half peeled, probably left by some poor bastard 20 years ago. I told myself 1 drink, just to take the edge off the knocking, the itching tattoos, the tooth that kept rolling toward me on the desk like it wanted attention. 1 drink became 3, 3 became the bottle. I passed out face down on the cot with my boots still on, dreaming of Sophia walking away down a corridor that stretched forever, her footsteps echoing like knocks inside marble. I woke up to silence, no plink plink, no dripping, just the hum of the lamps and my own pulse thudding in my ears like a war drum. The chalice was bone dry. I ran, boots slipping on wet marble, breath ragged, the thing in my chest thrashing like it knew what was coming. Chapel 17 felt colder than ever, air thick as burial dirt. The Madonna stood exactly where she always did, but something was wrong. Her head, sweet, sorrowful, eyes downcast, was turned all the way around, 180 degrees. The wood had cracked along the neck with a sound I'd missed while I was drunk. A wet, splintering snap like bone breaking backward. Her carved eyes stared straight at me now, empty sockets weeping something thicker than tears. Blood, thick, dark, arterial. It poured from her eyes in ropes, splashing into the empty chalice, overflowing, running across the pedestal in rivulets that hissed where they touched the marble. The smell hit me, copper and rust and something sweet underneath, like roses left too long in a coffin. I gagged, stumbled forward, grabbed the chalice with shaking hands. It was warm, too warm, and full to the brim with blood that couldn't have come from carved wood. I looked closer. My reflections in the silver surface wasn't right. My eyes, bloodshot from the grappa, were weeping the same thick red twin streams running down my cheeks, soaking my collar. I touched my face and my fingers came away wet. Not tears, blood, so fresh, drawn straight from my tear ducts while I slept, like the Madonna had reached through dreams and borrowed what she needed to keep crying. I dropped the chalice. It hit the floor, and the blood spread in a perfect circle, soaking into the stone like it was thirsty. That's when the others started, not just her. Every statue in the corridor, saints and angels and popes I'd walked past 100 times without noticing, began weeping in unison, a chorus of wet cracks as stone and wood and alabaster heads rotated on impossible axes. Blood poured from marble eyes, from painted tears, from cracks that opened like mouths. The air filled with the sound of crying that wasn't sound at all, just pressure. Grief made physical, pressing down until my knees buckled. I crawled back to the booth on hands and knees through rivers of blood that weren't there yesterday. The knocking in my chest had stopped. For the first time since I answered, "Oh, Tipsy," there was silence inside me, because whatever the Madonna's tears were keeping asleep, it was awake now, and it was looking through every weeping eye in the archives straight at me. I'm writing this with blood still crusted on my cheeks. The tattoos have changed again, across my eyelids now. So every time I blink, I see the word lacrimosa in reverse. If you ever drank too much and forgot something important, like confession, like your wife's birthday, like the one thing keeping hell asleep, tell me in the comments, how do you live with that kind of silence afterward? Because mine just got broken by something downstairs starting to cry my name. Chapter 5, Rule 4, do not follow the child in the red cassock who walks only in reflections. Blood doesn't dry down here. It crusts, flakes, then gets absorbed by the stone like communion bread on the tongue. My shirt stuck to my chest in stiff patches, every breath pulled at the scabbed tracks where the Madonna's tears had borrowed my eyes. The knocking inside my ribs had gone quiet after that night, but the silence was worse, like a child holding its breath before a scream. I started noticing the reflections. At first, it was just movement in the corners of my vision, a flicker in the polished brass of a reliquary door, a red blur across the wet marble floor. I told myself it was exhaustion, blood loss, the grappa still pickling my brain, but the old logs mentioned him too. Every guard who lasted longer than a month wrote about the boy in the red cassock, 19th century style, lace surplice stained dark at the hem, black shoes polished so bright they looked wet. He never appeared in direct light, only in mirrors, in puddles, in the curved surface of a silver chalice left too long on a pedestal, and he always beckoned with the same hand, the right one, index finger missing the last joint, like it had been bitten clean off. Rule 4 was scratched into the vellum so deep the paper had frayed. Do not follow the child in the red cassock who walks only in reflections. No one explained why. The logs just said the ones who did never came back the same. Some came back missing pieces. Some didn't come back at all. I saw him first in the blade of my pocket knife while I was trying to cut away the crusted blood under my eyes. A small face behind my reflection, pale as candle wax. Black hair slicked down like old photographs of altar boys before Vatican II. He raised the ruined finger and crooked it. Come here, then vanished when I spun around. Nothing there but empty corridor and the smell of wet stone. After that, he was everywhere. In the dark glass of a display case, holding a saint's calcified heart, in the curve of a brass incense burner, in the black screen of my dead phone when I held it up to check for signal that would never come. Always the same gesture, always smiling like he knew a secret I'd buried so deep even I couldn't find it anymore. I lasted 9 shifts. 9 times I saw him and turned away. 9 times I whispered every prayer I still remembered from childhood, the ones my mother made me say on my knees until the tiles left marks. But the blood on my shirt kept cracking open when I moved. The tattoos kept rearranging themselves into countdowns, and the silence in my chest was starting to feel like drowning. Section Lucifer 13 is off every official map. You reach it by taking a left, where the corridor dead ends into a wall painted with a faded fresco of Satan falling, wings on fire, mouth open in a scream no one ever hears. The wall isn't a wall. Push on the serpent's tongue, and it swings inward on hidden hinges. Inside is a single room, octagonal, lined floor to ceiling with mirrors framed in black and silver. They say it was built in 1666 to interrogate demons during exorcisms, mirrors to trap their reflections, silver to burn them. The church denies it exists. The logs call it the confessional of last resort. I went there because I was tired of running. The boy was waiting in the biggest mirror, the one directly across from the door, full length, cracked down the middle like a lightning bolt frozen in glass. He stood just on the other side of the reflection, red cassock, bright as arterial blood against the black frame. The missing finger crooked again, slower this time, patient, like he knew I was out of fight. I stepped forward. The mirror rippled when my boot touched the threshold, surface turning liquid, cold as holy water in January. My reflection didn't move with me. It stayed behind, watching with eyes that weren't mine anymore, too calm, too knowing. Then the glass sucked me through like a mouth swallowing. I fell forward into a negative world. The air was warm and thick, tasting of copper and milk. The walls pulsed, wet and pink, veined like the inside of a womb. Instead of marble floors, there was membrane stretched tight, slick under my boots, and hanging from the ceiling, upside down, arms spread like inverted crucifixes, were cardinals in scarlet robes, still alive. Their mitres dripped something clear and viscous. Their eyes tracked me, pupils blown wide, mouths sewn shut with gold thread that glinted when they tried to scream. One of them wore a face I recognized from old news, Cardinal Bellini, the one who vanished in '98 investigating irregular exorcisms. His chest had been cut open in a perfect Y, ribs peeled back like wings, heart still beating slow and deliberate. The boy stood in the center of the room, back to me now. Red cassock dragging through the fluid on the floor. I took one step, two. The membrane squelched. The cardinals moaned behind their stitches. He turned. It wasn't a child's face. It was mine at 8 years old, First Communion Day, hair combed flat with water, white suit already stained at the knees from kneeling too long. But the eyes were wrong, black from side to side, no whites, no mercy. And the mouth, God, the mouth, stretched too wide, showing teeth that hadn't grown in yet in 1987. Because that was the day my little brother Marco drowned. We were playing by the fountain after Mass. I was supposed to watch him. I turned away for 10 seconds, 10, to chase a girl in a blue dress who smiled at me. When I looked back, Marco was face down in 6 inches of water, arms floating like he was flying. They said it was an accident. They said children drown in puddles all the time. They never said I killed him with a moment of pride. The thing wearing my 8-year-old face opened its mouth and spoke with Marco's voice, the one that still woke me up, screaming in Naples' apartments. You let me go, Luca. Now it's your turn to follow. It lunged. I ran backward, boots slipping on membrane, slamming into the mirror I'd come through. The surface was solid now, cold glass against my spine. The cardinals thrashed, gold thread snapping, blood raining upward into the ceiling that breathed like lungs. The boy, no, the thing, walked toward me on legs that bent wrong, knees backward, fingers elongating into needles. There was only one way out. I drove my forehead into the mirror with everything I had left. The crack was deafening. Glass exploded inward and outward at once, shards slicing my skin like communion wafers made of razors. Blood poured into my eyes, my own this time, and I fell backward through the breaking reflection, tumbling onto the real marble floor of section Lucifer 13. The mirror sealed behind me with a sound like a womb closing. I lay there bleeding, laughing, crying. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Shards of glass stuck out of my forehead like a crown of thorns. When I touched them, my fingers came away red, but the pain felt holy, cleansing. In the biggest shard still clinging to the frame, I caught a final glimpse, the boy on the other side, pressing Marco's drowned face against the glass, mouthing 2 words over and over. Thank you. I crawled out of Lucifer 13 and haven't looked in a mirror since. Not even the black screen of my phone. The tattoos have spread to my eyelids now. Every time I blink, I see the negative archives, the cardinals, my brother's black eyes. Tell me something. If you're still listening, if the thing wearing your worst memory came back smiling and asked you to follow, would you have the strength to break the mirror? Or would you finally let it take you home? Because I think the next time he calls, I won't run. Chapter 6, Rule 5. If the relic of the true cross begins to burn with cold blue flame, extinguish it, only with fresh blood from the left wrist of a sinner. I stopped bleeding the normal way. The gashes on my forehead from the mirror shards scabbed over in minutes, then split again, like smiles that wouldn't stay closed. The tattoos had crawled across my cheeks now, spelling out fragments of the confiture in reverse, mea maxima culpa backward, so it looked like a curse instead of a confession. Every blink showed me flashes of the negative archives, the cardinals still hanging, their sewn mouths rippling like they were trying to whisper my childhood sins through gold thread. The boy in the red cassock hadn't come back, but I could feel him waiting behind every polished surface, patient as drowning. All Souls Night crept in without clocks or calendars, just a shift in the air, thicker, heavier, like the whole Vatican above us was holding a funeral no one was invited to. The blue lamps dimmed to a funeral purple, somewhere far off. Bells that hadn't rung since the Reformation tolled 13 times, each note dragging nails across my spine. That's when the burning started. Not heat, cold, the kind of cold that bites deeper than fire, the kind you feel in your marrow when you kneel on marble in February and realize God isn't listening. It came from the reliquary of the Vera Cruz, the holiest thing down here, they say. A single splinter of olive wood no longer than my thumb, supposedly from the true cross itself, brought back by Helena in the 4th century and guarded ever since. It sat in a crystal reliquary the size of a coffin, suspended on silver chains, surrounded by frescoes of angels with swords drawn. Historians argue whether Helena really found it. Some say yes. Some say Constantine needed a propaganda win, but no one argues what happens when it burns. Rule 5 was written on the vellum in letters that looked freshly scorched. If the relic of the true cross begins to burn with cold blue flame, extinguish it, only with fresh blood from the left wrist of a sinner. I ran. The corridors stretched wrong that night. Longer, narrower, the oil lamps guttering like they were drowning. My boots splashed through puddles that hadn't been there hours ago, warm puddles that smelled of iron and frankincense. The reliquary chamber doors were open when I got there, yawning like a mouth inside. The splinter floated in its crystal prison, wrapped in cold blue fire that didn't flicker or dance. It just burned, steady and merciless, eating nothing and everything at once. The wood wasn't charring. The flame was consuming something else, sin. Every lie I ever told on the job, every bribe I took, every night I chose the bottle over Sophia, every second I let Marco float face down because a girl in blue smiled at me. It all burned away in that blue light, and the pain was exquisite, like being flayed from the inside out while still breathing. I knew what I had to do. The guard's logs were specific. Ordinary blood doesn't work. Holy water makes it worse. Only blood from the left wrist, the side closest to the heart, the side that carries guilt, offered freely by someone who still has sins left to confess. I rolled up my sleeve. The tattoos there had rearranged into a perfect map of the stigmata, waiting. My pocket knife was dull from cutting crusted blood off my face, but it did the job. First cut across the vein, shallow. Testing, blood welled black in the blue light. I held my wrist over the reliquary, let it drip onto the crystal. The flame hissed, shrank an inch, then flared brighter. The cut sealed before the third drop fell, skin knitting together like it had never been opened. But the fire kept burning, deeper. Second cut, harder, sawing until I hit artery. Blood sprayed in a hot arc, splattering the crystal, running down in rivulets that steamed where they touched the flame. For one blessed second, the blue fire dimmed, almost out. Pain exploded up my arm, white hot, beautiful. Then the wound closed again. It was faster this time, flesh bubbling and reforming like time-lapse rot in reverse. The flame laughed. I swear it did. a sound like glaciers cracking. I cut again and again, each time deeper, chasing bone, blood pouring in buckets now, soaking my uniform, the floor, the frescoed angels who watched with painted eyes that followed me. My vision tunneled. The pain became pleasure, confession, communion. I was on my knees, sobbing, laughing, begging forgiveness in a language I didn't know I remembered. That's when I found the hidden chamber, behind the reliquary. A panel had swung open, triggered by the blood, maybe, or by the flame finally tasting enough sin to unlock its pantry. The smell hit first, dry dust and old meat. The way Naples catacombs smell when the bones have been there too long. Inside was a narrow room lit by a single candle that had never gone out, and hanging from meat hooks driven into the ceiling were the previous guards, dried out husks in uniforms like mine, wrists flayed to white bone, some missing hands entirely. Their faces were gone, peeled away or burned off, hard to tell. Envelopes of cash still clutched in whatever fingers remained, thick as bricks, blood-stained and unopened. One had a name tag I recognized from the logs, Marco. Another had died in 1987, the year my brother drowned. Their left arms were extended toward the door, like they'd been reaching for help that never came. I staggered closer, knife forgotten, blood still dripping from a cut that refused to close this time. The flame behind me roared higher, feeding. That's when I saw him, the newest corpse, still wearing the same uniform they gave me, navy blue, Vatican crest on the shoulder, name tag sewn in fresh thread, L. Rossi. The fabric was stiff with dried blood, but the date stitched under the name in red thread was clear. Setting November 2025, tomorrow. His face, or what was left of it, was mine, older, hollow-cheeked, eyes burned out to black sockets, the mouth stretched in a scream that never made it out. His left wrist was gone entirely, just a stump wrapped in rosary beads made of finger bones. My finger bones. The flame behind me went out with a sound like a sigh of relief. I don't remember screaming. I remember running, through corridors that bled from the walls now, past statues that turned their heads to watch me pass, past the mirror in Lucifer 13, where the boy in the red cassock waved goodbye with my own 8-year-old hand. I'm back in the booth. The knife is on the desk next to the black tooth and the unopened envelopes. My left wrist won't stop bleeding anymore. The tattoos have spread across my palm, spelling one word in letters that pulse with every heartbeat. Soon. If you ever took a job that paid too well for what it asked, if you ever thought your sins could be bought off with blood that wasn't Christ's, tell me in the comments, how much of yourself would you cut away before you realized the fire was never going to stop? Because mine just whispered thank you, and tomorrow, someone else will find my body hanging with the rest, wearing your name. Chapter 7, Rule 6, never read aloud the final name in the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the page that was never printed. My left wrist is a ruin now. The skin hangs in wet ribbons that won't stop dripping. No matter how tight I wrap it with strips torn from a dead guard's shirt. The blood smells sweet, like communion wine left out too long. And every time a drop hits the marble, it hisses and steams for a second before soaking in. The tattoos have spread to my fingertips. When I flex them, I can feel the letters shifting under the nails like splinters trying to grow outward. I haven't slept. I haven't needed to. Something in the blue flame must have burned the need for sleep right out of me. The way it burned the sin, I keep seeing my own corpse in my peripheral vision, hanging there with the others, mouth frozen open, eyes empty. It smiles when I blink. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum sits on a lectern of its own in Section Damnatorum, row after row of books the Church decided the world wasn't ready for. Not just Galileo and Luther, things older, things that predate ink and parchment. The index itself is a fat, chained volume bound in human skin. They say it's calf, but the pores are too big and the stretch marks look like screams. Every pope since 1559 added to it. Every pope since 1966 pretended it didn't exist anymore. Down here, it still does. I went looking for it because the pain in my wrist had started spelling words. The blood kept arranging itself into fragments, nomen, nomen, over and over, until I understood name. The final rule was about a name. Rule 6 was the shortest on the vellum, written so small it looked like an afterthought. Never read aloud the final name in the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the page that was never printed. No explanation, no or else, just that. I found the book easily, too easily. The chain was already unlocked, the hasp hanging open like someone had been waiting for me. The cover was warm, pulsing the same way the red codex had. When I opened it, the pages turned themselves, fanning past centuries of condemned titles, De Revolutionibus, the Da Vinci Code, some grimoires I couldn't pronounce, until they stopped on their own at the very end. There was an extra page glued to the inside back cover. It wasn't parchment, it was skin, fresh, still pink at the edges, pores raised with goose flesh. A single line of text had been written across it, in handwriting I recognized before my brain caught up. My handwriting, the same scrawl I used when I signed divorce papers, when I wrote Marco's name on a toy boat the day before he drowned, when I filled out the suicide note I never sent. Luca Antonio Rossi, Kids November 2025, Peccator Maximus, in Manus Tuas, Domine. The ink wasn't ink, it was blood, thick and glistening, still wet enough to run when I tilted the page. My blood, from the wrist that wouldn't stop bleeding. I could smell it, copper and fear and the faint sweetness of the grappa I drank the night I almost pulled the trigger. I should have closed the book, should have walked away, let the blue flame take whatever was left of me. But the pain in my wrist flared white hot, and the blood on the page started bubbling, rising up in tiny beads like it was boiling from the inside. The letters rearranged themselves while I watched, forming a single command, say it. I whispered the name, my name. The moment it left my lips, every light in the archives died at once. Not flickered, not dimmed, died. The oil lamps snuffed out like God himself, pinched the flames between finger and thumb. The emergency LEDs, the green banker's lamp in the booth, even the faint glow from my phone screen, gone. Absolute black, the kind that has weight, that presses against your eyeballs until you see phantom sparks. Then the voices started, thousands of them, tens of thousands, layered so perfectly it sounded like one voice made of many, rising from the walls, the floor, the air itself, Hail Marys. But backward, not just the words reversed, whole sentences unprayed, unrepented, unforgiven. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Anelp atarg, irmev over and over, faster and faster, until the Latin blurred into a single droning hum that vibrated in my teeth. The temperature plummeted so fast my breath crystallized in front of me. Frost raced across the marble like spilled milk, crackling under my boots. It climbed my legs, my ruined arm, my neck, needle sharp, burning cold. I tried to move and couldn't. My lips had frozen together. When I forced them apart, the skin tore, and I tasted blood again. That's when I felt it forming, letters of ice crystallizing on my mouth, spelling out 2 words I could read in the dark because they were burned into my soul now, too late. The voices rose to a scream that wasn't sound. It was pressure. A cathedral full of damned souls praying themselves straight into hell. My eardrums burst with wet pops. Warm blood trickled down my neck and froze before it reached my collar. In that blackness, something touched my cheek. Not cold, warm, human fingers, gentle, the way my mother used to when she checked for fever. They traced the frost on my lips, then pressed something small and hard into my hand, the black tooth I coughed up nights ago. A child's voice, Marco's voice, whispered right against my ear, breath smelling of fountain water and lilies. You said my name first. Luca. Now I get to keep yours. The frost shattered off my lips all at once. I screamed. The lights came back as suddenly as they'd died. Oil lamps flaring blue, LEDs harsh white, and I was alone again. The index lay open on the lectern, the extra page now blank, skin already drying and flaking away like old wallpaper. My wrist had finally stopped bleeding, because there was nothing left to bleed. I'm sitting in the booth recording this with one hand. The other one, the left, ends in a cauterized stump sealed with perfect black glass. No pain, no blood. Just smooth and shiny, like it was never there. The final envelope appeared while I was staring at it, thicker than all the others. Inside is a single sheet of cream paper and a first-class train ticket back to Naples. The paper says, "Thank you for your service, Signor Rossi. Your replacement arrives tomorrow, in service. A friend. If you're Catholic, you know what happens when you speak a name that was never meant to be spoken. You become the silence that comes after. I don't know what they'll find when they come down the elevator tomorrow. Maybe my body hanging with the others. Maybe just an empty uniform and a recording. Either way, if a letter ever shows up at your door with black wax and no return address, burn it. Because some names aren't printed for a reason, and mine just got added to the list." Chapter 8, Rule 7. When they finally come for you, do not run. The ticket back to Naples is burning a hole in my pocket, literally. The paper is warm, like it's been sitting under a candle flame, and every time I touch it, the edges curl a little more, ink bleeding into the shape of an upside-down cross. My stump doesn't hurt anymore. It's stopped bleeding, stopped feeling, stopped being mine. The bone rosary lies on the desk next to the phone I'm recording this on. The finger bones clicking together every time the booth breathes, which it does now, slow and patient. Like the whole archive is one big lung waiting to exhale. I know what night it is without clocks. All Souls Day bleeding into whatever comes after death when the church pretends it's still in control. The veil isn't thinning, it's gone, ripped open like the skin on my wrist. and everything we kept buried down here is crawling out to collect what's owed. It starts with the weeping, not just Chapel 17 anymore. Every statue in every corridor, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, begins crying at once. Not tears, not blood, something thicker, darker, that eats the light. I hear the first crack of marble joints moving, stone grinding on stone like old knees in winter, then footsteps, heavy, wet, marching in perfect unison. A parade of the damned dressed as saints. They're coming for me, but they're not hurrying. They have all night. They've had 2,000 years of nights. The codex opens itself next. I hear the chain snap from 2 sections away, the cover slamming back hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Pages tear free and take flight, hundreds of them, flapping like bats with wet leather wings, screaming my suicide note in Latin as they swirl through the corridors. They know every word I never sent Sophia, every regret I drowned in grappa. They circle the booth like vultures made of parchment, blotting out the blue lamps until the only light is the cold glow from the reliquary where the true cross burns again. Blue fire punching straight up through the floor now, eating the marble in a perfect circle, widening, widening, until I can see down into the dark below where something looks back with eyes that used to be popes. Mirrors shatter all at once. Every reflective surface in the archives explodes outward in a rain of silver glass. I catch glimpses as the shards fly past the booth window, former guards being dragged backward through the broken frames by small hands in red cassocks, their mouths sewn shut with gold thread that snaps one by one as they scream my childhood sins. The boy leads them, my face at 8 years old, black eyes shining, missing finger pointing straight at me like accusation and invitation all at once. The temperature plummets so fast the blood on the floor freezes mid-drip. My breath comes out white and stays there, hanging in the air like ghosts, too tired to move on. Frost races across the booth walls, spelling out the act of contrition in reverse Latin, letters forming faster than I can read them. Deus meus, ex toto cord penitet me omnium meorum peccatorum. Backward, always backward, like everything down here is undoing itself, unpraying, unrepenting, uncreating. Rule 7 is the last one on the vellum, written in letters so faint I had to hold it to the green lamp to read when they finally come for you. Do not run. Kneel and recite the act of contrition backward in Latin. Only then will you be allowed to die quickly. I understand now. The archives were never a prison. They were a larder. 2,000 years of broken souls, exorcists who lost, priests who fell, sinners who thought confession was enough, fed one by one to the things chained beneath St. Peter's bones. The demons didn't escape. They were invited. Every generation the church picks someone like me, someone already damned, already empty, and sends the letter with the black seal. The contract isn't for security, it's for delivery. I was the meal they've been starving for. The marching gets closer. I can hear the statue's feet now, stone on stone, but wet, like walking through flesh. The codex pages batter against the booth window, smearing my suicide note across the glass in blood-brown ink. The blue flame rises higher, licking at the edges of the desk, cold enough to burn frostbite into my skin. Through the widening hole in the floor, I see them waiting, cardinals hanging upside down, mouths finely open, singing the backward Hail Mary in voices that sound like every confession I ever lied in. My knees hit the marble without me telling them to. The bone rosary crumbles to dust in my remaining hand. I start reciting. The words come out wrong way. Unprayer, unforgiveness, but perfect. Muscle memory from childhood, from kneeling on rice until my knees bled, from begging God to bring Marco back, even if it meant taking me instead. Deus meus, ex toto cord paenitet me omnium, meorum peccatorum, mutaropse muc et, suaviuca et, sud persnoc, sud pepmoc me teefo et. The marching stops outside the booth door. The flame goes still, silence so complete I can hear my heart stop. I finish the last line backward, voice cracking on the final amen that isn't an amen anymore. The phone is still recording, propped against the ruined rosary, red light blinking like a dying eye. I lean close to the lens, what's left of my face filling the screen. If you're watching this, don't answer the letter. Whatever you do, don't. The booth door opens behind me. I don't turn around. I don't need to. In the phone screen. My reflection finally smiles. Not my mouth. Its mouth. Too wide. Too many teeth. Black eyes shining with Marco's drowned forgiveness. The sound that comes next isn't screaming. It's chewing, wet, patient, grateful. The red light blinks once more and goes dark. The Vatican secret archives are hiring again. Check your mailbox.